The following podcast is entirely a work of fanfiction. It is unofficial, unaffiliated, and unauthorised. Neither the podcast, nor any individual involved in its production, is now, nor has ever been, in any way associated with HBO, Game of Thrones, George R.R. Martin, or the Song of Ice and Fire book series. The podcast was, is now, and shall always be entirely without profit. Neither the podcast directly, nor its makers indirectly, generate or receive any form of revenue or financial restitution that might otherwise accrue to the rightful copyright holders. The following podcast is entirely a work of fanfiction. We hope you enjoy it.
King's Landing is slowly coming to life. Stalls are unpacked, chamber pots emptied into gutters, shutters and doors thrown open to admit the morning air, still fresh and crisp before the 1001 stinks of the city turn it fetid and rank. A pair of city guard pull a small wooden wagon down a narrow back alley, stopping by a middle-aged woman in a filthy apron waiting by an open door.
You're late.
These take longer to catch than rats.
The woman leans back into the doorway.
Oi! Delivery, come make yourself useful.
A young man appears from within. The woman pulls back the canvas covering the wagon and inspects the 3 naked cadavers underneath, each bearing more deep sword slashes than the last.
Bloody hell. These are practically minced already.
All part of the service.
The woman leaves the others to their labours and walks inside. She passes through her shop and out the front door onto the street.
Meat pies! Come get your meat pies! Finest filling in King's Landing!
In an instant, the bright morning is plunged into darkness as heavy black storm clouds gather over the city. The baker interrupts her patter to hold out a hand, her brow furrowed with confusion as the first flakes of snow melt in her palm. Tracing the commotion to a nearby alleyway, the baker joins a small crowd investigating its origins. Stepping over splintered wood and broken boards, she approaches a large stack of crates arranged at the entrance to an alleyway, her gaze tracking up to an enormous tear in the canopy of cloth suspended overhead. A white launches itself over the remaining crates and sinks its teeth into the baker's throat. In the gardens of the Red Keep, the most understated royal wedding in the history of Westeros is about to begin. A white wooden trellis frames the aisle, bordered on either side by 2 modest banks of witnesses. There are no familiar faces here, only minor lords and ladies, servants, waiting women, and a ragtag assemblage of low-level functionaries. Euron waits in excited anticipation beside the septon at the head of the aisle. Cersei enters the garden, her arm linked with Qyburn's, and walks the aisle to Euron's side. She wears a newly tailored red and gold gown, but otherwise has made no concessions to the occasion. No white dress, no veil, no cape bearing her family's sigil. Euron beams at her proudly, but Cersei can only summon the thinnest of smiles. At the water's edge, a pair of wizened old fishermen sit with baited line. In place by the time the sun first broke that morning, the 2 old boys doze peacefully to the soothing rhythm of the black water lapping at the pebblestone shore. Startled awake, the first of the men topples off his rock, while the second leaps to his feet and snatches reflexively for his fishing rod. He only barely manages to wrap his hand around the wood before a heavy weight pulls on the line and threatens to snatch the rod away. The first fisherman, recovered from his fall, adds his own strength to that of his friend, and together they retreat backwards up the waterfront, wrestling manfully with their underwater adversary. Gradually, their catch begins to emerge from the black water. The fisherman's line loops up through the white's nasal cavity and out its hollow left eye socket, the rusted hook hanging like macabre jewellery below its cheekbone. The white charges the fisherman and tackles the first off his feet. The second turns and runs inland as fast as his arthritic legs will carry him.
My lords, my ladies, we stand here in the sight of gods and men to witness the union of man and wife. One flesh, one heart, one soul, now and forever. We shall now bind their hands, one to the other, symbolising the bond that unites these two souls into one indivisible whole.
Euron and Cersei each hold out a hand, and the Septon proceeds to bind them together with a gold ribbon. Those in attendance cannot help but notice the curious gloom that has so quickly enveloped the city.
Let's hurry this along, shall we?
The Septon is taken aback. Euron leans in conspiratorially.
You'll have to forgive my love's impatience. She's eager to get to the bedding.
The Septon returns to his knot, but stops in surprise at the sight of snowflakes settling on Cersei and Euron's bound hands.
Look upon each other and say the words, Father, Smith, Warrior, Mother, Maiden, Crone, Stranger.
Father, Smith, Warrior, Mother, Maiden, Crone, Stranger.
A low hum of confused muttering breaks out among the wedding party, heads turning in curiosity towards the city. Qyburn puts his finger to his lips and shushes the congregation. A pair of plump little lords play on the grass of their stately family home, a beleaguered servant sweeping a broom through the family stables in the background. Urged on by her two young charges, the servant reluctantly creeps into the stables. At their rear, she looks up to find a gaping hole in the wooden roof directly over a large pile of hay, a pile of hay now rustling inexplicably. She extends a tentative hand. The white explodes from the hay and drives a sword into the servant's stomach. Limping heavily on a broken leg, its jaw hanging loose from its hinges, the white turns to pursue the little lords fleeing across the lawn.
I am hers and she is
he
mine.
is mine.
From this day until the end
of
of
my days.
Now, even the Septon cannot ignore the noise. Like the wedding guests, he cranes his head towards the city. Qyburn hurries to the head of the aisle.
Ladies and gentlemen, I beg you, let us return our attention to the ceremony.
Perhaps the Queen is right. Let's get to the point, shall we?
The Septon knows he has lost his audience, and under pressure from Euron's speed-it-up hand-waving, he rattles through his lines.
Let it be known that Queen Cersei, the House Lannister, and Euron of the House Greyjoy are one heart, one flesh, one soul. Cursed be he who seeks to tear them asunder.
All eyes turn skyward, peering into the thick black clouds overhead. Viserion bursts from cover and swoops down over the gardens of the Red Keep. The ribbon tying Euron's hand to Cersei's tears apart as Cersei flees towards the castle. The Night King brings Viserion around again, and this time the dragon lets loose a blast of intense blue flame. The top of the Red Keep explodes. The towers that for 300 years served as sentries keeping watch over King's Landing are reduced to rubble and ash in a matter of seconds. Viserion wheels around time and again, unleashing another blast on every pass. A terrified swarm of Lannister soldiers scurry out of their barracks like ants from a hill. The very ground beneath their feet quakes, then crumbles as the sea-facing wall of the Red Keep collapses, taking with it into the sea the greater part of the overhanging cliff face on which it stood. Cersei, Euron and Qyburn reach the Great Hall. Through a hole where the west wall used to be, they see Viserion coming around for another pass. The ceiling of the connecting chambers buckles, then collapses. The tremor brings the nearest wall crumbling down, the avalanche of rock bearing directly for Cersei. Euron leaps forward, covering her with his own body. Their fate appears to be sealed until the mountain materializes from the dust clouds all about and puts his body between them and the debris. Cersei looks at Euron's face, shocked at his chivalry, then with cynical understanding at his hand placed protectively over her stomach. The mountain effortlessly scoops Cersei up in his arms, and he and Euron follow Qyburn through a collapsing archway and down the connecting staircase, only a second before the Great Hall itself explodes beneath a sustained salvo from Viserion. Bran stands by the weirwood tree in Winterfell's Godswood, the trees beauteous in the first bloom of summer. He hears a happy whistling somewhere in the distance, but growing closer.
Hello?
From among the trees stroll two familiar faces.
Osha! Maester Luwin!
Bran runs to Osha and embraces her.
Pleased to see you, little lord.
Maester Luwin laughs as Bran throws his arms around him.
Gods, how you've grown.
Who's that whistling?
In answer to his question, Hodor lumbers into the clearing.
Hodor!
Hello, Bran.
You can talk!
When she lets me.
He's been making up for lost time, believe you me.
But how?
When you pass through the veil between worlds, it's like starting fresh. Everything you carried in life just floats away.
Bran looks aghast. He lifts his shirt to reveal his wound from the Night King's blade. The skin around the ragged hole in his abdomen has turned black as a rotten apple.
Have I passed through?
Not yet, but close enough that we can reach you. On this side, there's no more secrets, no such thing as mysteries. There are some things we need to show you.
Osha points across the Godswood to the open entrance to Winterfell's crypt.
It's down that way, little lord.
You're not coming with me?
Always.
Bran hugs Hodor, then walks towards the entrance to the crypt. Viserion circles the ruins of the Red Keep. The obscuring snow falls so heavily now that the castle is discernible only as a malformed skeleton hunched on its hill. The top of the central tower is destroyed, the throne room exposed to the open sky. Descending deftly as a bird on a branch, Viserion lands on its floor. The Night King slides down from the dragon's back and unceremoniously dumps his cargo onto the ground. His hands bound behind his back, Jon Snow has no way to break his fall. Viserion flaps his great wings and takes back to the sky. Jon struggles into a sitting position and watches as the Night King casually strolls up the steps and sits upon the Iron Throne.
Why did you bring me here? Why am I still alive? Cut me free, and let's be done with this, one way or the other.
Jon traces the sound to the end of the platform, where the doors to the throne room once stood. From the final turn of the staircase slowly emerges a bent and haggard figure, shrouded against the snow by a worn red cloak faded almost pink. The hunched stranger shuffles towards Jon, using their wooden cane as much for ballast as a walking aid, creeping forward as though a stiff breeze might blow them to their death. The figure stops before Jon, and, with a hand as gnarled and coarse as a vulture's talon, pushes back its hood. The pale, liver-spotted skin that stretches thin as silk over the skull sags and folds about the chin and neck. Pinhole eyes, varnished milky white with cataracts, survey Jon from their cavernous sockets. Jon squints back, as though trying to bring the old crone into clearer focus.
You look troubled, Jon Snow. Can young hearts really be so fickle that you've forgotten me already?
Jon struggles to reconcile the voice he recognizes with the face he doesn't. Only then does he think to take in the faded red robes, the choker and its lusterless red stone.
Melisandre?
For a while longer, yes.
Melisandre slowly turns to address the Night King, where he sits impassively observing from his throne.
You'll forgive me if I don't kneel, Your Grace. Old bones, stone floors. The indignities of age never cease.
What happened to you?
Only what happens to us all, eventually. The duration of my service outran the days of my natural life, but the Lord of Light permitted me a brief stay of execution.
Melisandre touches the choker at her neck. The stone at its centre, once a pulsating luminous red, is as dull as an old copper penny.
And I passed it on to you.
Jon looks equal parts disbelieving and appalled.
You thought your resurrection came without a price. Only death can pay for life, Jon Snow. When I gave you back your life, mine became forfeit.
Melisandre finds a pile of rubble, painfully eases herself down, and takes a seat.
I'd never have asked anyone to... Why would you do that? Why throw away your life for a stranger?
Melisandre only smiles, her lips peeling back to reveal a toothless mouth of naked gums.
Even after all the mistakes I made, still I allowed myself to be blinded by my own self-importance. I really did believe it was my part to play, the bringing together of ice and fire. But the Lord of Light had one final lesson in humility. Lyanna of the House Stark, Rhaegar of the House Targaryen, Aegon Targaryen, their issue. Ice and fire were already joined. In you, Jon Snow.
Jon shakes his head, as though trying to dislodge the very notion. His mind churning, he looks around desperately, searching for some source of consolation, some hidden refutation of the words he's hearing.
My father was Ned Stark. I never knew my mother. Lyanna and Rhaegar. I don't...
Theirs was a love that knew no equal, not even that which Eddard Stark bore his little sister, the sister that from her deathbed made him swear to keep her son safe from Robert Baratheon's wrath.
My father was an honourable man. He wouldn't lie to me all my life.
No, only for all of his. He knew all too well that the hard, lonely service of the Night's Watch was not the life Lyanna would have chosen for her son. But, as the executioner's sword came down, he sent a grateful prayer to the old gods that it would at least be a long one.
Daenerys' new fleet draws close to their destination, the coast of the Crownlands sliding away to the west. The decks are packed with soldiers, Golden Company, Dothraki, freedmen, Northmen, Ironborn, and 5 adult elephants. Podrick has found a quiet space where he can be alone. He stands at the stern, disconsolately watching the waters churn in the ship's wake.
If you're thinking of jumping, be sure to put your armor on first. You'll sink like a stone.
Sir Jaime.
Jaime joins Podrick, looking out over the water.
You'll have to forgive my gallows humour. Until recently, I never really had occasion to develop a better strategy for coping with loss.
Not many of us get to live such charmed life.
True, but even the most fortunate among us can't outrun the worst of life forever. It catches up with us all, sooner or later.
They watch the sea, churning and white in the ship's wake. Podrick picks without thought the calluses at the base of each finger. He catches Jaime watching and grins sheepishly.
After the first few days of practice, I couldn't even grip the handle. My hands were so blistered.
Nobody tells you about that part. The songs are only interested in the finished swordsman, never the novice with raw palms and bleeding knuckles.
I tried just to ignore the pain, and when that didn't work, I tried soaking my hands in oil after Lady Brienne fell asleep at night. Then, one day, I found my hands didn't quite hurt so much as they had the day before. Then a couple of days after that, they didn't hurt at all. That night, we were sitting by the fire, and she saw me looking at the calluses that had formed beneath my fingers all along my grip. "You should be proud of those," she said to me. "You pushed through the pain, and you earned them. Swordsmanship is a hard skill to learn, and a dangerous one to master. You'll get hurt again, I promise you, but never in the same way. Never there."
I have something for you.
Jaime hands Podrick a parcel wrapped in cloth and twine. Podrick folds back the fabric to reveal Oathkeeper's hilt. He looks at Jaime in surprise.
She'd have wanted you to have it. You earned it.
At the bow of the flagship, Jorah approaches Yara as she finishes giving instructions to her captains.
Did you have much trouble convincing the Golden Company that our coin was as good as Cersei's?
Dragons make excellent negotiators, it turns out.
And the Ironborn?
2/3 came over right away, once we offered them the same terms we offered the Golden Company.
What happened to the other third?
We had to make room for your men somewhere.
Further back in the fleet, Golden Company soldiers desperately try to calm their disgruntled cargo. One soldier gives an ill-advised yank on the saddle ropes tied about the elephant's neck, and with one quick whip of its head, the elephant sends the soldier up through the air and into the sea. Tormund and Gendry appear from below deck.
Easy now. I'm not going to hurt you.
The elephant settles somewhat, but watches Tormund closely. Tormund places a soothing hand on its trunk.
There we go. There we go. Nice and calm.
Tormund pets the elephant, gives the still wary soldiers a reassuring nod. He looks the now placid elephant over and turns to Gendry, brow furrowed.
Across the sea, they shear their mammoths like sheep.
Not a bold mammoth. It's an elephant.
Elephant?
Jorah studies Yara out the corner of his eye, searching for the right words.
I haven't yet had the opportunity to offer my condolences for your brother.
Yara looks out over the waters.
I lost Theon the first time when Ned Stark took him to Winterfell as a boy. I lost him again when Ramsay Bolton broke him. It still hurts, but at least this time I lost him to something he believed in. However much I might resent that something. We all have to die, but only the lucky few get to do it on their own terms.
This seems to strike Jorah in a manner he wasn't expecting. Yara's second-in-command approaches at the double.
Captain, ship's ahead.
Looks like Euron has our welcome party ready and waiting. How soon until they're on us?
That's the thing, Captain. They're sailing in the opposite direction.
Yara snatches the spyglass from Tanner and inspects the horizon for herself.
Something spooked him good and proper, looks like.
Jorah raises a quizzical eyebrow.
It's been a pleasure hosting you and your army, Sir Jorah, but it's time for you to get the fuck off my ships. I've got a fleet to catch.
Davos stands at the bow of his ship. Descending below deck, he finds Jaime and the Hound ready and waiting.
So, this is my cargo. What's your plan once you're inside the city?
I'm going to kill my brother.
Sister, probably.
Well, if we're going, now's the time.
Jaime and the Hound pass Davos by and climb the stairs. Davos shakes his head.
If I smuggle any more Lannisters, I'll have to replace the onion in my banners.
Melisandre shivers and wraps her robes tighter against the falling snow.
I'd forgotten what it was to be cold, and how much I hated it.
She holds one hand up before her face, the skin so gossamer thin, the light actually shines through the spaces between the bones of her palm.
As I departed these shores, I could already feel my life growing thin, becoming sheer, like a sheet of fine fabric stretched to the point of tearing. I waited for death to find me. I waited, and I waited, but death never did come. That's when the Lord of Light spoke to me for the last time. It was I who must seek out death.
Jon follows her eyeline to the Night King, still sitting patiently upon the Iron Throne.
I resisted at first, the way you resist now. A hard truth is difficult to accept, particularly when it contradicts the easy truths to which we cling so determinedly. I was like a drowning man, so mad with fear he drags his own saviour to the bottom of the sea.
Jon looks with disgust at the Night King.
He's no saviour.
No, only an agent of a greater purpose. As am I. As are you.
He has no higher purpose. He was just a man, and then the children of the forest made him a weapon.
And who created the children? For what purpose, if not to turn creators themselves? You can trace it all back to a beginning, if you must, Jon Snow, but you'll only be taking the long way round to reach an end that will find you soon enough standing right where you are.
Melisandre considers Jon's face, then sighs and hauls herself to her feet. She slowly approaches the Night King.
He was a man once, it's true, but the children stripped him of his humanity the day they turned him into the monster that sits before you.
Bran descends the steps of the crypt. At their bottom, rather than the familiar tunnels he's walked 1,000 times, he finds instead a field of wheat beneath a bright blue sky. Bran pushes his way towards the barking, through crops that tower a foot over his head, but is suddenly knocked from his feet by an enormous bundle of fur. The direwolf licks at Bran's face, its tail wagging furiously. The direwolf lopes away towards his master's summons, and Bran rises to his feet and follows. He emerges on the far side of the field to find a wooden table set before a modest home of wattle and daub. Sitting on the bench, the young wolf, Robb Stark.
Robb!
Bran starts towards his brother, and Robb rises from the table to meet him. Over Robb's shoulder, Bran sees a young woman in simple peasant's dress emerge from the hut and place a large cooking pot upon the table, giving no indication that she is aware of the Stark's presence. Robb watches Bran's reaction as a young man and a slight boy on the cusp of adolescence emerge from the wheat field, so alike in appearance that there can be no doubt they are father and son. The man kisses the woman, then he and the boy wash their hands in a wooden pail set against the house. As they clean up, a girl of perhaps 6 or 7 emerges from the hut with a loaf of bread, which she places beside the pot on the table.
What is this?
Something you need to see.
The family sit down at the table. They link hands and lower their heads in prayer. When they raise their faces again, Bran gets his first good look at the man's face.
It's him. Before the Children of the Forest. Before he became the Night King.
Wait. Watch.
Like wild animals in a predator's path, the family suddenly freezes. Bran follows their eyeline to the edge of the wheat field. A child of the forest has stepped out from cover and stands silently regarding the family. The man slowly stands, takes a protective step forward to insert himself between his family and the child of the forest. He holds up a placating hand.
If it's food you want, we have plenty.
A dozen more children step out into the clearing, surrounding the man and his family. The boy and girl run to their mother.
Whatever it is you want, just take it. But please, leave my family be.
I'm sorry. I wish there was another way.
As one, the children rush upon the man. Bran can't help but look away. Robb places a comforting hand on his shoulder. Greywind bolts into the wheat field in search of the howling's source.
Go on, before you lose him.
Bran looks reluctant, but Robb has used his lord's voice and will brook no argument. Bran takes a last look at his big brother and runs into the wheat field after the direwolf. Melisandre reaches out a hand, holds it flat, a hair's length from the Night King's cheek.
Imagine if you were stripped of everything you'd ever loved, everything you'd ever been. Imagine, then, if the same curse by which you were condemned provided you with the power to realize an immediate vengeance. They took from him that which he cared for most in this world, and so he did the same to them. In his anger, he turned this new power upon the very land his creators summoned him forth to defend, and so brought forth the desolation you know as the Long Night.
Bran finds himself abruptly at the end of the wheat field. He breaks through the final row to discover a world transformed. The covering of black clouds overhead spills a snowfall so heavy Bran can barely see Greywind only a dozen paces ahead. Greywind's barks rise to a new pitch as a new voice arrives on the wind to greet his own. Through the wall of driving snow, Shaggy Dog comes bounding on, followed close by another familiar face.
Rickon!
Bran wades forward and meets his little brother. Bran opens his arms wide, but Rickon demurs.
There's no time for that. We can't stay here long. I'll show you what you need to see, and then we'll go.
Without another word of explanation, Rickon and Shaggy Dog plough through the snow back the way they came. Bran screens his face with an upraised arm, realizes they're walking parallel to the edge of a sheer drop. Peering over the ledge, Bran sees only another vast expanse of white, some 200 yards below.
Where are we?
The Giants' Lands, the highest point in all of Westeros. 2,000 years from now, Roland Arryn will begin construction on the Eyrie, right where we're standing.
Bran looks out over the snow-buried vale in astonishment.
This is the Long Night. The winter that lasted a generation.
It's exactly as old Nan described in her stories. Except for the ice spiders. I think she made up the part about the ice spiders.
Bran has only just succeeded in tracing the source of the hunting horn when he sees a dark, shadowy shape emerge through the snow. Its amorphous bulk slowly separating and resolving as it moves quickly forwards into a small coterie of children of the forest. Stalking through the darkness close on their trail, a pair of white walkers brandishing long lances of ice follow the fleeing children with discordant calm. Bran grabs Rickon's sleeve and pulls him away.
It's all right. They're not here for us.
Bran watches, transfixed, as the walkers run down their quarry. Only one of their party remains standing, and Bran recognizes behind the mask of anger and terror the very same face he first saw moments ago, regarding the farmer and his family with grim intent. The child faces down the walkers, resolved to meet her end with defiant pride, but her end has only just arrived. The Night King strides from the shadows behind the child's back. Barely has she turned before the Night King has lifted her by the throat, bringing his face inches from her own. The Night King looks into the wide, wild eyes of his creator, then snaps her neck with a sudden sharp twist of his wrist. He tosses the limp body into the snow with disdain. Then he and his walkers dissolve away into the snowy darkness. Bran feels himself drawn forwards for a closer look, compelled to cross the distance to see for himself the Night King's handiwork before it's lost to the falling snow.
Bran, don't!
But Bran ignores his brother. He drives on, the base of compacted but shifting snow giving way to the reverberating slickness of ice. His attention locked on the contorted body ahead, Bran doesn't feel the ice shudder beneath his feet, or hear its screech of protest. Bran reaches out a frozen white-blue hand, whether to close the child's open but unseeing eyes, or simply to touch the exposed skin that already seems to have lost its otherworldly, ethereal glow. Even Bran could not have said for certain. The earth opens and swallows Bran whole. Melisandre studies herself in the dead blue eyes of the Night King.
And so he waited. The world of men would hide itself behind a great wall of ice. Fire made flesh would bring that world to heel. The house of the dragon would rise and fall. And still he waited, because even in their ascendancy, he knew the natural world would, in time, provide its own corrective to the imbalances of these dragon lords. For 8,000 years, he was made to wait for the coming of the Dragon Queen, last of her line, and the arrival of the Great War. But now his term of service is finally at its end.
What does Daenerys have to do with this?
The Night King suddenly looks skyward. Melisandre follows his gaze.
The time for choosing is upon us, Jon Snow. The Conqueror has arrived.
On the far horizon, the great black bulk of Drogon grows larger as he soars high over the city, his progress levelled directly at the Red Keep. As silent as the falling snow, Viserion descends from the canopy of clouds above like an arrow from a bow. Only her dragon's instinctive veer at the very last second saves Daenerys from Viserion's clutching talons. Shaken and surprised, Daenerys bids a tactical retreat away across the capital. Viserion circles the Red Keep and lands before the Iron Throne. As Jon and Melisandre watch on, the first aghast, the other admiring, the Night King descends from the throne and climbs onto Viserion's back.